The bottom of the center console, underneath the fake bottom, is a switch. Turn it down, nothing happens. But turn it up, and there goes the back seat, revealing a trap containing a stash of contraband.
Andrew Thornton fell to his death carrying too heavy of a load of cocaine while parachuting.
The first thing they usually feel is muscle contraction pain. Then they complain of chest pain because now the heart's starting to be affected.
Some ways cartels use to smuggle narcotics put mules' lives in danger. Others are simply outrageous. But how have smuggling methods evolved over the years? And what role did authorities have to play in it? Let's explore some of the craziest ways cartels smuggle drugs. In September 1985, a man named Andrew Thornton II decided to parachute from a twin-engine plane in the dead of night to smuggle the $15 million worth of Colombian white powder that was strapped to his body into the United States. Shockingly, Thornton had worked as a narcotics officer before deciding he would make much more money on the other side of the law. Thornton's shift to smuggling drugs began when he became increasingly paranoid and resigned from the Lexington Fayette Law Enforcement Department in 1977 to join a smuggling ring in Kentucky. This ring was linked to a larger group called The Company, a syndicate smuggling anything from narcotics to weapons. In 1980, they had more than 300 members and $26 million worth of boats and planes. This was happening at the peak of the white powder surge in the United States. This was the age of Pablo Escobar, when tons of coke were being shipped on a yearly basis from Central and South America into the United States. Thornton's ex-wife Betty remembers his strange shift. He believed he was an impeccable warrior. He was a philosophical, incredibly disciplined, extremely spiritual and loyal warrior, with his own code of ethics, who thrived on excitement. On September 9th, 1985, Thornton boarded a plane to Monteria, Colombia, for the smuggling mission of his life. Bill Leonard, his karate instructor-turned-bodyguard, later said that Thornton had lied to him about flying to the Bahamas when they were actually picking up 400 kilograms of cocaine to smuggle into the United States. After they were forced to dump hundreds of pounds of white powder to lighten the plane's load, Bill said Thornton spoke a few words to him before they parachuted out of the plane. "Just do what I tell you, and I'll get you out." Thornton was paranoid that officers were on his tail, so he decided to abort the mission and try to deliver the powder on foot. At around 8:30 a.m. on September 11th, 1985, Thornton was found with a broken neck after his parachute did not open.
Andrew Thornton fell to his death carrying too heavy of a load of cocaine while parachuting.
He had $4,500 in cash, 2 pistols, 2 knives, ropes, food, and more than 70 pounds of white powder, according to the officers who retrieved his body. Remember the even bigger load of coke he dumped from his airplane earlier on? Well, it turns out that a poor bear in a Georgia forest had found it and eaten it.
It's a tale of drugs, planes, parachutes, and one unlucky bear.
Needless to say, the bear lost its life almost immediately. An autopsy was performed, and it was revealed that the bear's stomach was packed with white powder. This is the story that inspired the 2023 horror comedy C**Caine Bear, starring Ray Liotta. Well, in this movie, the bear survives and goes on a bender. But the reality of the narcotics trade is far darker. Thousands of lives are lost each year from the trade, either through the destructive narcotics or in the never-ending war on drugs. And as authorities push harder to put it all in the past, cartels devise ever crazier ways of smuggling. Andrew Thornton II was just one of many outrageous stories. Narcotics have been illegal for a very long time, and this is precisely why cartels have had a long time to devise crazy ways of smuggling.
Lo que les dije, esto va a ser un vuelo con 55 kilos, ya listos para su exportación. Tenía muy buenas habilidades como deportista y ya esta es mi vida.
But you don't make the big bucks this way. Back in the day, this was the main method cartels were seeking to carry narcotics across borders. Specialized mules would take big loads and cross deserts, jungles, and treacherous mountains, hoping to dodge law enforcement. Of course, paragliders are a rare find. Also, no matter how specialized the mule is, it's only one person, and they can only carry so much. When you're in the big game, you have to think big. Ships, planes, and the like. While the war on drugs began as early as 1914, the peak of the trade happened in the late 1970s and 1980s, and this is when cartels grew to unprecedented sizes, considering brand new quantities of shipments.
The American illicit drugs market is the biggest in the world, worth annually more than $80 billion. Last year, federal authorities intercepted 7,000 pounds of cocaine, 3 times the amount seized the previous year.
During this time, Pablo Escobar grew in wealth and power like no other drug lord before. He bought entire law enforcement departments in Colombia and even in neighboring countries. He protected his fleet of airplanes from border control and ensured he had a steady flow of white powder into the United States. Another ringleader, Sandra Avila Beltran, used tuna boats to hide big loads, ensuring a lucrative relationship between Mexico and the United States gangs for years. In 2001, the United States authorities seized a tuna fishing boat carrying 9 tons of white powder. But that was just one of Sandra's many boats. She had been doing this under the radar for over a decade, back to the 1980s, though. Apart from ships and planes, cartels figured out another quick way of getting their products into the States: human stomachs. Indeed, instead of having a mule carry big loads through tough terrains for days, they would have mules ingest little bags and board planes. They would be in the United States in just a few hours, just in time for the bags to be processed.
The drug smuggling operation is highly organized, and there are plenty of people prepared to risk imprisonment for the large amounts of money offered by the dealers. Some will even go through the uncomfortable process of swallowing plastic bags filled with narcotics, something that can end in death if the bags burst.
Yeah, there are a million reasons why this is not okay. First and foremost, no type of smuggling is okay. Secondly, this is a highly dangerous job for the mule. Not only is it uncomfortable, but there are serious risks of having a bag explode in your stomach, and that is not survivable.
If you're carrying as a mule packets of cocaine and one ruptures, the acute powder of cocaine is rapidly absorbed. It creates a disaster in your stomach. The first thing they usually feel is muscle contraction pain. Then they complain of chest pain because now the heart's starting to be affected.
There's a very short amount of time the mule has if their life is to be saved. But if they're on a plane, hours away from landing, the chances are slim. And here's the thing. As soon as authorities caught on to this, quite literally stomach-turning method, they found ways to see through their passengers at the airports.
Yeah, if you stand like this, that way. Yeah?
This man was caught in a UK airport, stuffed with narcotics packages.
Okay, sir. What we can see on the x-ray looks like you have packages inside you. Time is 08:53 hours. I'm arresting you on suspicion of being involved in the importation of a controlled drug.
The process is even crazier after an arrest is made. The mule is still carrying the bags inside, so the authorities need to wait for them to, well, come out. So he's dressed in a special suit and accompanied to a special kind of restroom.
So he's gone into the special toilet facility where if he starts producing packages, they then have to be cleaned up by the officer who's gone in with him, and then they'll be bagged up as well.
Gross work, I'm sure you'll think. But the officers are just happy if the mule manages to do this and survive.
Obviously, the quicker they're out of his system, the best chance he's got of survival, basically.
This one man was carrying around 1 kilogram of white powder inside him. That's worth 50,000 British pounds. He was charged and sentenced to 5.5 years in prison in the UK. However, this was just one mule. There are cartels around the world employing the same method. There's a really sad reality behind this. Most of the mules employed by cartels to do this sort of job are seen as expendable. They are very poor, from vulnerable backgrounds, sometimes ridden with addiction. Sometimes they're not even employed, but threatened into doing this job. To the cartels, these people don't matter. If one suffers a burst bag or gets arrested, they have countless others.
A $100,000 cruiser with 2 young men on board is a classic profile case.
Okay, we're gonna board you, check the papers.
A radio linked to Customs headquarters indicates the agent's suspicions are well-founded.
Across the 1980s, authorities got better at catching smugglers at sea. That's when cartels, ever richer, came up with a new plan: submarines. The first narco submarines were intercepted in the early 1990s, but they only grew more popular today. Reportedly, narco subs are assembled in underground boatyards in the Amazon, the same area where most of the coca leaves are harvested. Millions of dollars go into the production of just one sub, but it seems to pay off. Once, a staggering 7.7 tons of white powder were found on a narco sub's board. Sure, that one was caught. But it turns out that narco subs are one of the most successful smuggling ways. Only a fraction of the submarines are ever caught, and most of them do several round trips before they even come on authorities' radar. In 2019, Spanish authorities discovered a narco sub that had crossed the entire Atlantic Ocean, from Brazil to Spain. And of course, that was not the first time that the sub was making this trip, and that's just one type of ship. In the 2000s, authorities started intercepting another kind of semi-sub.
Over the last decade, particularly emerging from Colombia, but there's been a set of semi-submersibles, a couple of which have been caught by the US Coast Guard, which don't fully submerge, but just appear above the water, and they've also been used to take cocaine up the coast and bypass the border.
Here's a bleak fact. The more authorities push to eliminate one side of smuggling, the more ways cartels find. Shockingly, it was one such government plan that ended up creating the modern-day Mexican cartels. In the 1980s, President Ronald Reagan ordered a huge crackdown on the Caribbean smuggling routes. This meant that authorities were harder than ever on catching planes and ships coming into the United States. This made cartels think, okay, we need to abandon air and sea and move once again to land. Enter the giant US-Mexico border.
Pues sí, como por ejemplo los carteles que tienen que mantener su gente y todo, tienen que sacar dinero donde hay. Si ya se acabaron sus reservas, pues tienen que buscarlo.
The war on drugs also helped create monsters in Mexico. As authorities tried eliminating kingpins in an attempt to reduce cartels to ashes, the cartels crumbled into smaller warring cartels. From one or two, Mexico ended up with dozens of cartels, and the violence between them led to unspeakable massacres. That is not to say authorities must sit and watch as cartels take innocent lives and make money from every crime you can imagine. It's just a very complicated situation. And yes, as Mexican cartels rose in power over the 2000s, their smuggling methods got crazier and crazier.
Border Patrol agents near Douglas, Arizona found a catapult attached to the border wall made to chuck bundles of marijuana into American territory. More than 47 pounds of the drug found.
Catapults are not the go-to method for any Mexican cartel. However, there is something that El Chapo turned into a Sinaloa cartel trademark: tunnels.
Well, this is the tunnel that Joaquin Chapo Guzman came out of. We're gonna go down and take a closer look. Let's go check it out, guys.
When El Chapo escaped prison a second time in 2015, authorities appeared shocked to find a mile-long tunnel stretching from his maximum security cell into a vacant property. There was nothing to be shocked about. The property had just been bought by his wife, Emma Coronel, and tunnels had been El Chapo's trademark since the 1980s. Indeed, when El Chapo started working for the Guadalajara cartel back in the 1980s, he came up with a brilliant plan. What if they built secret tunnels from Mexico straight into the US? Only the cartel would know about it, and authorities wouldn't find them for years. This earned him promotions and the expertise needed to start his own cartel after the Guadalajara crumbled in 1989.
Well, we're going to get a first-hand look at the kind of tunnel that the Sinaloa cartel has become famous for constructing in their efforts to traffic drugs across the border. So I think it's safe to assume that this is the sort of tunnels that they use to cross drugs into the United States.
El Chapo didn't build his own escape tunnel back in 2015. He had several trained Sinaloa men digging for him while he played prisoner and showed up on the Altiplano prison CCTV footage. This just goes to show how many people are now trained to build narco tunnels just like El Chapo did some 4 decades ago.
As the government said, this motorcycle contraption-like thing, it's not actually a motorcycle, it's some kind of vehicle that is fitted also with these little carts that was probably used to move the dirt. Well, it's adapted. It doesn't have a front tire. It has a small energy source here. It can move forward and backward. Looks like a very old mining type vehicle.
Hundreds of narco tunnels have now been discovered, some of which are miles long and equipped with electricity and purpose-built rail tracks. It's not just the Sinaloa cartel who builds tunnels now. Any powerful cartel, the Jalisco New Generation, the Gulf, the Tijuana, you name it, that will have tried using tunnels as a smuggling method in the last few decades.
Drug tunnels have been built predominantly on the US-Mexican border, where they've taken drugs from cities like Tijuana to San Diego. They were developed mostly in the 1990s, and particularly by a very famous Mexican drug kingpin called Joaquin El Chapo Guzman.
35,000 trucks and 200,000 cars cross the Mexican border into the United States every single day. This remains the main method cartels use to smuggle narcotics today. And it's not just white powder, but even more destructive substances like crystal and fentanyl.
The North American Free Trade Agreement opened up trade between Mexico and the US. So there was a real explosion in drug smuggling over the border between Mexico and the United States during the 1990s.
Indeed, this has been going on for quite some time, so authorities have been learning how to outfox the cartels. But so have the cartels. Now they use anything to conceal their shipments. Bananas, hair extensions, and toys included. One of the main smuggling methods today is the trap car. Cartels make custom-built vehicles with hidden compartments that can be accessed only through a very specific and complicated sequence of actions. For a long time, Border Control didn't even know these compartments existed. And even if they do, it takes a while until they get them to open.
In the bottom of the center console, underneath a fake bottom, is a switch. Turn it down, nothing happens. But turn it up, and there goes the back seat, revealing a trap containing a stash of contraband.
If Pablo Escobar was rich enough to own entire law enforcement departments and bribe presidents, so are modern-day cartels. This means that their craziest smuggling routes or methods are oftentimes protected for years until uncorrupt authorities catch on. Narcotics are hidden in objects, secret compartments, and even fruit on a daily basis. If you can think of a way, one cartel has probably already tried it. It's a never-ending game of cat and mouse. Authorities learn and curb a smuggling route, and another one emerges. Is there an end to this? And are there crazy smuggling ways cartels have yet to come up with? Hey, thanks for watching. Leave a comment and remember to like and subscribe before you go. On to next time.